On a quiet summer evening in 1944, a 9-year-old boy rode his bicycle in front of his home on Beta Street in Etobicoke, Ontario. His older brother watched from the window, then looked away for mere minutes. When he glanced back, the bicycle lay abandoned in the front yard. The boy was vanished into a mystery that would consume 3 generations of his family and become the oldest active missing persons case in Toronto police history. Gerald Marlow stands at the living room window on Beta Street, watching the front yard grow darker as evening settles over Etobicoke. His little brother had been there just moments ago, pedaling his bicycle in lazy circles on the quiet residential street. Gerald glances up from his book, expecting to see Richard's small frame hunched over the handlebars. The bicycle lies on its side in the front yard, handlebars tilted against the grass. Gerald's eyes scan the street, the neighboring yards, the hedge separating their property from the Johnsons' next door. Nothing moves in the growing dusk. "Pee-wee?" His voice carries across the yard, swallowed by the evening quiet. No response comes back. Gerald walks down the porch steps, his shoes crunching on gravel. He circles the house, calling his brother's name louder now, checking the backyard, the side alley, the small garden. The bicycle remains where it fell, chrome handlebars gleaming dully. Something cold settles in Gerald's stomach, not quite fear yet, but unease that doesn't match the peaceful summer evening. He jogs to the Johnsons' house and knocks. Mrs. Johnson appears, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Have you seen Richard?" Gerald asks. "My little brother. He was just in the front yard." Mrs. Johnson shakes her head slowly. She hadn't seen or heard anything unusual. No child playing, no voices calling, nothing at all. Gerald moves to the next house, then the next, his pace quickening with each doorway, each shake of the head. By the time his mother's car pulls up 20 minutes later, Gerald has asked everyone on the street. None of them have seen Pee-wee. Richard David Marlow stands 3 feet 8 inches tall and weighs 50 pounds. His blonde hair falls across his forehead in a way that makes his mother constantly reach out to smooth it back during Sunday church services. His blue eyes watch the world with quiet intensity. At 9 years old, he's earned the nickname Pee-wee, honestly, noticeably smaller than other boys his age. Teachers describe him as a good student, well-behaved, never causing trouble. At home, his siblings know him as shy, preferring to play alone rather than joining rowdy games on Beta Street. He loves his bicycle more than any other possession, spending hours riding figure-eights in the front yard. The scar at his temple marks him distinctly, a thin line at the edge of his hairline where he fell as a toddler, splitting skin against a table corner. The aluminum ring he wears carries more mystery. The letters KL stand out clearly on its surface, engraved into the soft wartime metal. No one in the family knows where Richard got it or what the initials mean. When his mother asks, he simply shrugs and says he likes it. She lets him keep this small puzzle piece of his inner world. Beta Street in 1944 exists between rural countryside and developing suburb. The western edge of Toronto sprawls slowly outward, claiming farmland for new houses. The Marlow home sits on a street where neighbors know each other by name, where children play freely until darkness, where front doors stay unlocked. Behind residential blocks, industrial pockets create employment. Between houses and industry, open fields stretch toward ponds and creeks where children build forts and explore. The area, bounded by Evans Avenue, Horner Avenue, Browns Line, and Kipling Avenue, contains everything familiar to Richard's daily existence. Summer brings long twilight hours, warm air smelling of cut grass, evenings that stretch toward 10 o'clock before true darkness settles. His father, John Marlow, serves overseas with the Canadian military. The war dominates every conversation, every newspaper headline, every radio broadcast. Gertrude Marlow manages the household with 5 children at home, rationing butter and sugar, mending clothes, maintaining routines that keep a family functioning during wartime. The empty chair at dinner has become normal. Tuesday, July 18th, unfolds like any other summer day. Richard wakes to morning sunlight, eats porridge and toast with rationed butter spread thin, helps clear dishes. The afternoon finds him in the front yard with his bicycle, the chrome handlebars hot from direct sun. He rides in circles, perfecting his turns, occasionally standing on the pedals for speed. He wears long blue pants despite the heat, a short-sleeved jersey shirt, brown running shoes, gray cotton socks with a distinctive yellow band at the top, and the aluminum KL ring on his finger. His dark blue windbreaker and blue cotton cap wait inside for cooler evening air. When Gertrude announces the movie theater plan that evening, Richard shakes his head. He'd seen the same film Monday night. The story no longer holds interest when he could stay home with his bicycle instead. Gerald will remain home anyway, preferring his library book to another trip to the theater. Gertrude nods agreement. Richard can stay with his older brother, supervising. The decision feels unremarkable, the kind of small choice that happens a dozen times in family life. The movie theater group departs just before 7 o'clock. Gerald settles into the living room chair near the window, his book open on his lap. Richard takes his bicycle and begins riding in the front yard. The evening air feels perfect, warm but not oppressive, the July sun lowering toward the horizon, casting long shadows across Beta Street. Gerald reads, glancing up periodically. Richard circles past the window, focused on his riding. Gerald returns to his book, comfortable in the routine, secure in the knowledge that his brother plays safely within sight, on a street where nothing dangerous ever happens. The light fades as Gerald reads. He shifts in his chair to catch better illumination from the lamp, turning slightly from the window. His book pulls him into its story. Time moves forward, unmarked. When Gerald finally looks up again, intending to call Richard inside before darkness makes outdoor play impossible, his eyes find the bicycle first. It lies on its side in the front yard, exactly where a child would leave it after dismounting. But no child stands nearby. No small blond boy examines anything in the garden. No movement catches his eye anywhere in the dimming twilight. Gerald sets his book on the chair arm and walks to the front door, pushing it open. Warm July air wraps around him as he steps onto the porch. The street stretches empty in both directions, houses standing silent in the fading light. Shadows pool beneath trees and hedges, but nothing moves within them. Pee-wee? His voice sounds too loud in the quiet. He waits, listening for a response, for the sound of small feet running, for laughter from a hiding spot. Only silence answers back. Gerald descends the porch steps, his eyes scanning every corner of the yard. The bicycle lies undisturbed, its rear wheel still spinning slightly, catching the last rays of sunlight. He walks past it toward the side of the house, checking behind the large oak tree where Richard sometimes plays. Empty. The backyard reveals nothing. No small figure crouched in the garden. No movement behind the shed. Gerald's pace quickens as he circles back to the front. His mind runs through logical explanations. Richard went to a neighbor's house without telling him. Richard is hiding, playing a game. Richard walked down the street to visit a friend. Each possibility feels wrong somehow. His brother doesn't wander without permission. He doesn't play tricks. And he wouldn't leave his beloved bicycle lying in the yard. Gerald jogs toward the Johnson's house next door, his heartbeat picking up speed. Mrs. Johnson appears at her door, dish towel in hand, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as Gerald asks his question. She shakes her head. No, she hadn't seen Richard. She'd been in her kitchen for the past hour, window open to catch the breeze. If a child had been playing nearby, she would have heard. Gerald thanks her and moves to the next house, then the next. Mr. Peterson from 3 doors down had been sitting on his porch reading the newspaper. He saw nothing, heard nothing. Mrs. Henderson across the street had been tending her roses in the front garden until just minutes ago. No child passed by. No bicycle rode past. The street remained quiet all evening. With each negative answer, the cold feeling in Gerald's stomach spreads. He breaks into a run, moving from house to house, knocking on doors, asking the same question over and over. Have you seen my brother Richard? Small boy, blonde hair, riding a bicycle? Neighbors emerge onto their porches, joining the search. They check their own yards, their garages, calling Richard's name into the gathering darkness. Someone suggests the field behind the houses. A group of men grab flashlights and head toward the open land, their voices carrying back through the evening air. Richard, Pee-wee. The calls echo and fade, unanswered. Gerald runs back to his own house, bursting through the front door, searching rooms he's already checked. Richard's bedroom sits undisturbed, the bed neatly made, clothes folded on the dresser. The bathroom is empty, The kitchen shows no signs of anyone having entered since dinner. Gerald stands in the living room, breathing hard, staring at his book still open on the chair. How long had he been reading? 10 minutes? 15? How long between the last time he glanced up and saw his brother, and the moment he looked again to find the bicycle abandoned? Headlights sweep across the front of the house. Gerald's heart leaps. Maybe Richard is with his mother. Maybe there's a simple explanation, but when Gertrude Marlow steps out of the car with her other children, Richard isn't among them. She takes one look at Gerald's face and knows something is wrong. "Where's your brother?" she asks, her voice still calm, not yet understanding. "I can't find him." The words come out rushed, stumbling over each other. "He was in the yard riding his bicycle, and then I looked away, and when I looked back, he was gone. The bicycle is there, but he's not. I've asked everyone on the street. No one saw him, no one heard anything." Gertrude's face changes. The color drains from her cheeks. She moves past Gerald without another word, walking quickly to the front yard where the bicycle still lies on its side. She stares at it for a long moment, then begins calling her son's name, her voice rising with each repetition. "Richard! Richard David Marlow! You come here right now!" She turns in circles, scanning the street, the yards, the shadows. Her other children cluster on the porch, watching their mother with wide eyes. "When did you last see him?" Gertrude asks Gerald, her words sharp and precise. "Maybe 15 minutes ago?" "I was reading. He was riding his bicycle right there." Gerald points to the spot where the bicycle lies. "I looked away for a few minutes, and then he was gone." "A few minutes?" Gertrude's voice rises. "How many is a few?" Gerald's face crumples. "I don't know. Maybe 10? Maybe less. I wasn't watching the clock." Gertrude turns away from him and strides toward the street. She walks to the corner, looking in both directions, her hand shading her eyes against the last of the sunset. Nothing. She walks the other direction, past 3 houses, calling Richard's name continuously. Neighbors who Gerald already spoke to come out again, drawn by the desperation in her voice. Mrs. Johnson hurries across from her yard, taking Gertrude's arm. "We'll find him," she says firmly. "He can't have gone far. Children wander off, they get distracted. He's probably in someone's backyard, playing." "Richard doesn't wander," Gertrude says, pulling her arm free. "And he wouldn't leave his bicycle. Something's wrong." More neighbors gather now, forming small search parties. The men with flashlights return from the field behind the houses, shaking their heads. They found nothing. No small boy. No signs of anyone having walked through the tall grass. The group organizes quickly, dividing the neighborhood into sections. Some will search yards and garages. Others will walk the streets in widening circles. Someone mentions the ponds a quarter mile away, and Gertrude's face goes white. "Check them," she says. "Check every pond. Check the creeks." As darkness settles completely over Beta Street, more than a dozen people spread out through Etobicoke, calling a small boy's name. Flashlight beams cut through the night, sweeping across yards and fields. Dogs bark in response to the commotion. House by house, the word spreads. The Marlow boy is missing. Young Pee-wee, the shy one with the blonde hair, vanished from his own front yard while his brother watched from the window. No one saw him leave. No one heard a car. No one noticed anything unusual at all. Gertrude stands in her front yard, staring at the bicycle. In the darkness, she can barely see it anymore, just a darker shape against the grass. But she knows exactly where it is, can picture every detail. The chrome handlebars Richard polished with a rag just yesterday, the seat adjusted to accommodate his small frame, the pedals he pushed around and around in endless circles. He loved that bicycle. He would never willingly leave it, lying in the yard. At 10 o'clock, someone calls the Etobicoke Police Department. The police cruiser arrives on Beta Street just after 10:30, its headlights washing across the Marlow house. 2 officers step out, older men, both beyond military age, their uniforms pressed despite the late hour. Constable Robert Davies approaches Gertrude first, notepad already in hand. His partner, Constable William Chen, begins speaking with the neighbors still gathered on the street. The procedure feels methodical, routine, as if missing children represent just another Tuesday night call. But Gertrude sees something in Davies' eyes when he looks at the bicycle lying in the yard, a flicker of concern that his professional demeanor can't quite hide. "When did you last see your son, Mrs. Marlow?" Davies asks, pencil poised above paper. "I didn't. I was at the movie theater." Gertrude's voice sounds hollow, detached. "My older son Gerald was supervising. Richard was riding his bicycle in the front yard." Davies turns to Gerald, who stands on the porch with his siblings. "Son, can you tell me exactly what happened?" Gerald descends the steps slowly, his face pale in the cruiser's headlights. "I was inside reading. Richard was outside on his bicycle. I could see him from the window. I looked away to read my book, and when I looked back up, maybe 10 or 15 minutes later, the bicycle was in the yard, but Richard wasn't there." His voice cracks on his brother's name. "I searched everywhere. I asked all the neighbors. No one saw him." 10 or 15 minutes, Davies repeats, writing. "You're certain about that time frame?" "I think so. Maybe it was less. I wasn't watching a clock." Gerald's hands twist together. "He was right there. I saw him. And then he wasn't." Davies exchanges a glance with his partner. Chen has finished interviewing the neighbors and shakes his head slightly. "No witnesses, no information, nothing useful." Davies closes his notepad and looks at Gertrude with an expression that tries for reassurance but doesn't quite achieve it. "We'll organize a proper search," he says. "But I need to ask some questions first. Did Richard have any history of running away or wandering off?" "No." Gertrude's answer comes swift and firm. "Never. He's a good boy, obedient. He plays in the yard or on the street where I can see him. He doesn't wander. Any conflicts at home? Arguments? Reasons he might want to leave? His father is overseas serving, but Richard never complained. He understood." Gertrude's voice hardens. "My son did not run away. Something happened to him." "Any strangers in the neighborhood recently? Anyone who shouldn't be here?" Gertrude looks to the neighbors still clustered on the street. Heads shake. Mrs. Johnson steps forward. "This is a quiet street, officer. We all know each other. If a stranger had been hanging around, we would have noticed." Davies nods and reopens his notepad. "I need a description. Height, weight, what he was wearing." Gertrude recites the details mechanically, as if reading from a list she's memorized. 3 feet 8 inches tall, 50 pounds, blonde hair, blue eyes, a small scar at his temple near the hairline, wearing long blue pants, a short-sleeved jersey shirt, brown running shoes, gray socks with a yellow band at the top, a dark blue windbreaker and blue cotton cap, though she's not certain if he put those on, an aluminum ring with the letters K.L. engraved on it. "K.L.?" Davies looks up. "What do those initials stand for?" "I don't know. Richard had the ring for months, but never said where he got it. The initials don't match anyone in our family." Gertrude's hands clench at her sides. "Are you going to search for him, or are you going to stand here asking questions all night?" Davies closes his notepad with a snap. "We'll search, ma'am. But in cases like these, the first few hours matter most. Sometimes children wander farther than parents expect. Sometimes they're hiding because they're afraid of getting in trouble. Sometimes they're at a friend's house and lost track of time. Has Richard done any of those things tonight?" "No," Gertrude says through clenched teeth. "Because my son is missing." By midnight, the search has grown beyond anything Etobicoke has seen in recent memory. Word spread through telephone calls and neighbors knocking on doors, and volunteers arrive from blocks away. The police contact the Army militia station nearby. With so many regular officers serving overseas, the military provides backup for civilian emergencies. Within 2 hours, over 100 people comb through the neighborhood surrounding Beta Street. Flashlights bob in the darkness like fireflies, concentrated in areas where a small child might hide or fall. The ponds receive immediate attention. Men wade into dark water up to their waists, feeling along muddy bottoms with their feet, dragging long poles through deeper sections. The water remains stubbornly opaque, revealing nothing. Other volunteers search the drainage creeks that run behind the industrial area, walking along their banks, calling Richard's name into culverts and under bridges. The sound echoes back, mockingly empty. Dogs accompany some searchers, sniffing at the ground, but without an item of Richard's clothing to provide scent, they wander aimlessly, confused by their handler's urgency. A team investigates the abandoned wells scattered throughout the less developed areas, remnants of old farms, some covered with rotting boards, others open to the sky. Volunteers lower themselves on ropes, flashlights sweeping across stone walls crusted with moss and decades of accumulated debris. They find rusted buckets, dead animals, trash thrown down by thoughtless passers-by. No small boy in blue pants and a yellow banded sock. The outhouses behind older properties receive similar scrutiny. Doors yanked open, interiors examined despite the smell. The ground around them dug up in case of collapse or cave-in. Nothing. By 3 in the morning, search parties have covered every accessible area within a mile radius of Beta Street. Exhausted volunteers drag themselves back to the Marlow house to report their findings. Nothing. 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 The word repeats, like a curse. Gertrude stands on her porch, accepting each negative report with a nod. Her face expressionless now, shock settling in where panic had burned hours before. She refuses to go inside, refuses to sit down, refuses the tea, Mrs. Johnson tries to press into her hands. Her son is out there somewhere. She will wait until someone brings him home. As dawn breaks on July 19th, the searchers regroup. Constable Davies coordinates with the militia captain, a stern-faced man named Wallace who approaches the problem with military precision. They divide the search area into a grid, assigning teams to methodically cover each section in daylight. The ponds will be drained using mechanical pumps. The creeks will be dredged with specialized equipment borrowed from the Public Works Department. Every building, shed, garage, and structure will be searched. Every household will be interviewed again in case someone remembers a crucial detail in the harsh light of morning. Gerald hasn't slept. He sits on the porch steps, staring at the bicycle still lying in the front yard where his brother left it. No one has moved it. It remains there like evidence at a crime scene, waiting to reveal secrets it doesn't actually hold. Other Marlow children sleep fitfully inside, their mother refusing to let them join the search despite their pleas. "They're too young," she said. "They need to stay home in case Richard comes back. Someone has to be here when he returns." The first day of searching yields nothing despite the expanded effort and daylight visibility. Volunteers walk shoulder to shoulder through fields, moving in straight lines, eyes scanning the ground for any sign. A scrap of blue fabric, a small shoe, disturbed earth. The industrial area receives particular attention. Workers at the factories are interviewed during shift changes. Did anyone see a small blonde boy yesterday evening? Did any vehicles enter or leave the area between 7 and 8 o'clock? The answers come back negative or uncertain. So many vehicles move through daily. So many workers. Who notices one more car, one more truck, one more delivery? The rail lines present another possibility. Could Richard have wandered along the tracks, following them away from familiar territory? Search parties walk the rails for miles in both directions, checking the ditches alongside, peering into the tall grass and brush. Railway workers are contacted, asked about trains that passed through the area Tuesday evening. Could a child have climbed aboard somehow, hidden in a freight car? The railway men shake their heads. The trains don't stop there. A child couldn't board a moving train. But the searchers check anyway, desperate for any explanation that makes sense. By the end of the second day, the mechanical pumps have drained 3 ponds completely. Volunteers wade through ankle-deep mud, searching the exposed bottoms. They find bicycle parts, but not Richard's bicycle. They find old farm equipment. They find bottles and cans and the detritus of decades. They find nothing that explains where a 9-year-old boy disappeared to in 15 minutes on a quiet Tuesday evening. The dredging equipment arrives on the 3rd day, brought in on flatbed trucks, operated by men from the Public Works Department, who normally clear blocked drainage systems. They drag heavy nets through the creeks, pulling up mud and weeds and occasionally fish that flop gasping on the banks. The nets come up again and again, emptied and cast back into the water. Hours pass. The sun beats down. The operators wipe sweat from their faces and continue the methodical process. Nothing. The creek yields its secrets grudgingly. Rusted tools, lengths of pipe, an old wagon wheel, but no trace of Richard Marlow. Wells continue to be located and searched throughout the week. Some haven't been used in 20 years, their openings barely visible beneath overgrown vegetation. Volunteers hack through weeds with machetes borrowed from homeowners, exposing brick-lined shafts that drop into darkness. More ropes, More flashlights. More careful descents into spaces that smell of earth and decay. Each well searched represents another possibility eliminated, another hope extinguished. The list of places Richard could be grows shorter. The list of places he isn't grows impossibly long. Gertrude barely eats. Friends and neighbors bring food that sits untouched on the kitchen table. She drinks water when someone forces a glass into her hand, but her eyes never stop scanning the street beyond her window. At night, she leaves every light in the house burning, beacon bright, so Richard will know where home is if he's trying to find his way back in the darkness. The electricity bill doesn't matter. Nothing matters except her son coming home. Gerald moves through the house like a ghost, avoiding his mother's eyes, unable to bear the unspoken accusation he sees there even though she's never said a word of blame. After 2 weeks of intensive searching, the organized effort begins to wind down. The militia returns to regular duties. Volunteers have jobs to return to, families to feed, lives that cannot remain suspended indefinitely. Davies stops by the Marlow house every few days with updates that aren't really updates. No new information, no witnesses have come forward, no leads to pursue. He tells Gertrude the case remains active, that they haven't given up, but his face tells a different story. Cases like these, where a child vanishes without a single piece of evidence, rarely end well. The longer Richard stays missing, the less likely he'll be found alive. But Gertrude doesn't accept that logic. Cannot accept it. Her son is out there somewhere. Someone knows what happened. Someone saw something. The truth exists, waiting to be discovered. She just has to keep searching, keep asking, keep hoping. She will wait as long as it takes. She will never stop waiting. August arrives with oppressive heat that settles over Etobicoke like a weight. The massive search has ended. Volunteers dispersed back to their normal lives, but Gertrude Marlow remains at her post by the window on Beta Street. She watches every car that passes, every person who walks by, every child on a bicycle. None of them are Richard. The house feels different now, the air inside heavy with absence. His siblings speak in whispers, careful not to disturb their mother's vigil, careful not to mention their brother's name where she can hear. Gerald moves through each day, carrying guilt like a stone in his chest, the memory of those 10 or 15 minutes playing endlessly in his mind. If he had watched more carefully, if he had checked sooner, if he had been outside with Richard instead of reading his book. The police file on Richard David Marlow remains officially active, but the daily phone calls stop. Constable Davies visits once a week, then once every 2 weeks, then monthly. He brings no news, because there is no news. The investigation has exhausted every lead, followed every possibility to its dead end. The ponds stayed empty when drained. The creeks revealed nothing when dredged. The wells contained only darkness and decay. Every household within miles was interviewed, some multiple times. No one saw anything, no one heard anything. A 9-year-old boy rode his bicycle in his front yard and then ceased to exist, leaving behind only an abandoned bicycle and questions no one could answer. Gertrude follows up on every reported sighting herself when the police seem too slow to respond. A blonde boy spotted in Hamilton. She takes the train, walks the streets for hours, finds nothing. A child matching Richard's description seen at a farm near London. She convinces a neighbor to drive her, arrives to discover the boy belongs to a family who've lived there for generations. Each false hope chips away at something inside her, but she cannot stop, will not stop. Somewhere her son exists. Somewhere someone knows the truth. The family remains on Beta Street despite John Marlow's suggestion, after his return from military service in 1945, that they might move somewhere new, start fresh. Gertrude refuses. Richard knows this address. When he finds his way home, he needs to know where to come. She keeps his bedroom exactly as he left it, bed made, clothes in the dresser, the blue cotton cap resting on the nightstand. Dust accumulates on the surfaces despite her weekly cleaning. The room becomes a shrine to absence, a space frozen in time while the rest of the house ages around it. John tries to resume normal family life. He returns to work at the factory, manages the household finances, plays with his other children, attempts to coax his wife back to the present. But Gertrude exists somewhere else now, somewhere between the moment Richard disappeared and the moment he might return. She forgets to cook dinner. She stares at her other children as if seeing strangers. She jumps at every knock on the door, every telephone ring, hope flaring bright and desperate before crashing back into disappointment. John watches his wife fade like a photograph left too long in sunlight, her features blurring, her substance diminishing, until some days he barely recognizes the woman he married. Birthdays pass unmarked. Christmas brings no joy. The annual milestones that structure family life lose their meaning when one child remains missing. Richard should be 10 years old, should be 11, should be 12. Gertrude marks these ghost birthdays alone, sitting in his empty room, calculating the years he's been gone. She imagines him growing taller, his face maturing, his blonde hair perhaps darkening with age. She imagines him alive somewhere, trying to find his way back to Beta Street, and she convinces herself that her vigil matters, that her waiting serves a purpose. Her health deteriorates steadily through the late 1940s. Weight drops from her frame until her clothes hang loose, her face gaunt and shadowed. She sleeps poorly, waking at every sound outside, rushing to the window to peer into darkness. Headaches plague her, stomach problems that doctors cannot diagnose or treat. Her body rebels against the sustained stress, the unresolved grief, the impossible limbo of not knowing. John begs her to rest, to accept what seems increasingly certain, that Richard is gone, that they must find a way to move forward. But Gertrude cannot accept, will not. Her son is out there. She feels it with a certainty that transcends logic or evidence. In 1954, 10 years after Richard vanished, Gertrude Marlow dies at age 54. The official cause is heart failure, but everyone who knew her understands the real reason. She died of not knowing, died of waiting, died of hope that curdled into despair over a decade of unanswered questions. Her funeral draws the same neighbors who had searched those first terrible nights, now 10 years older, carrying their own accumulated griefs. They stand in the cemetery and remember the woman who had once been vibrant and capable before absence hollowed her out from the inside. Richard's case remains unsolved. No closure ever came. Gertrude went to her grave, never knowing what happened to her son. John Marlow lives another 30 years, managing the household alone, raising his remaining children to adulthood. He never speaks much about Richard. The loss becomes something he carries silently, a wound that never quite heals but scabs over enough to let him function. He dies in the 1980s, taking his memories of that July evening with him. The other Marlow siblings grow up, marry, have children of their own. They tell their kids about Uncle Richard, the boy who disappeared, the mystery that broke their mother's heart. The story becomes family lore, passed down through generations, growing hazier, with each retelling as first-hand witnesses age and die and the event recedes further into history. The police case file gets transferred through department reorganizations, moving from active investigation to cold case storage. The original paper documents, witness statements, search reports, Richard's physical description, sit in boxes in archive rooms, gathering dust. The bicycle disappears somewhere along the way, donated or discarded, its connection to the case forgotten. Beta Street changes with the decades. The old houses get renovated or torn down. The ponds are filled in as development spreads. The creeks get redirected into underground culverts. The physical landscape that searchers covered so thoroughly in 1944 ceases to exist, replaced by parking lots and commercial buildings and residential subdivisions. The landmarks that might have held clues are paved over, built upon, erased by progress. But one person refuses to let Richard fade into complete obscurity. Gail Dykeman, daughter of one of Richard's siblings, grows up hearing the story of her uncle who vanished before she was born. She sees the effect of his disappearance echoed through her family. Her grandmother Gertrude, dead too young from grief. Her father, withdrawn and haunted. The silences that fall when anyone mentions the past. As Gail reaches adulthood in the 1990s and 2000s, she begins asking questions. She contacts the Toronto police, discovers Richard's case still exists in their system, technically active but functionally forgotten. She requests copies of the file. She starts researching cold case investigations, learning about advances in forensic technology, discovering that cases once considered unsolvable are being reopened and sometimes resolved through new methods. Gail becomes the keeper of Richard's memory for a generation that never knew him. She collects photographs, newspaper clippings, her grandmother's letters. She builds a timeline of the disappearance, reconstructing events from family stories and police reports. She joins online communities dedicated to missing persons, sharing Richard's case, hoping someone might remember something useful. The internet connects her to people interested in historical mysteries, amateur investigators who suggest theories and possibilities. Most lead nowhere, but Gail persists. Her uncle deserves to be remembered. Her grandmother deserved answers that never came. And somewhere, if Richard lived, if he grew into an old man unaware of his true identity, he deserves to know where he came from. The years accumulate. 2000, 2010. The world changes around the unchanging mystery of Beta Street. Technology advances in ways that would seem like magic to the men who dredged creeks in 1944. Computers can store millions of records. DNA can identify individuals from microscopic samples. Databases connect information across continents. The tools that might solve Richard's case finally exist. They just need someone willing to use them. Gail continues her advocacy, her voice growing stronger, her determination deepening with each passing year. She will not let her uncle vanish twice, once from Beta Street and again from memory. Somewhere in a police archive, Richard Marlow's file waits, the oldest active missing persons case in Toronto's history. Somewhere the truth exists, buried under decades of silence, and somewhere Gail Dykeman refuses to stop searching for it. January 25, 2025. Richard David Marlow remains missing. His case file sits on Detective Chen's desk, the oldest active investigation in Toronto Police Service history. 80 years and 6 months have passed since a 9-year-old boy rode his bicycle in his front yard and vanished in minutes. No arrests have been made. No remains have been identified. No definitive answers have emerged. But the search continues. The Toronto Police Missing Persons Unit manages 68 historical cases of missing children dating back to 1944. Richards represents the beginning of that grim archive, the first entry in a database of unsolved disappearances. Chen reviews his file regularly, checking for new matches in NCMPUR, monitoring genealogical databases for genetic hits, following up on occasional tips from people who heard Gail's podcast appearances or saw documentaries featuring the case. Most leads dissolve quickly under investigation. Some require weeks of work before proving false. None have yet provided the breakthrough everyone hopes for. But the infrastructure for resolution exists now in ways impossible during those desperate searches in July 1944. DNA profiles wait in multiple databases, ready to flag matches within hours. Digital systems connect law enforcement across provinces and countries, sharing information automatically. Age progression software updates Richard's appearance annually, showing what an 89-year-old man might look like if he survived. The aluminum ring with K.L. initials remains documented in forensic databases, its description preserved for comparison if the artifact ever surfaces. The temple scar provides a permanent identifier that no amount of time can erase. The Ontario Missing Persons Act of 2018 has transformed cold case investigation. Police can now access records that previous investigators couldn't touch: health files, financial documents, adoption papers sealed for decades. Chen uses these tools to trace potential leads, following digital trails through archived records, searching for children who appeared in the system without proper documentation in 1944. The work proceeds slowly, hampered by incomplete historical data, but each lead eliminated narrows the field of possibilities. Richard's case has influenced how police respond to missing children today. The lessons from Beta Street, that a supervised child can vanish in minutes, that local searches often fail when perpetrators are mobile, that physical evidence must be preserved with future technology in mind, now inform standard procedures. When a child goes missing in Ontario, response protocols expand the search perimeter immediately. Biological samples from family members get collected at the outset. Digital alerts spread across provinces within hours. The mistakes of 1944 have been studied, analyzed, transformed into training materials for new investigators. Gail Dykeman continues her advocacy work, now in her 60s herself, her own children aware of the great uncle they never met. She maintains a website dedicated to Richard's case, updates social media accounts with anniversary posts, responds to messages from people interested in historical mysteries. The work has become her connection to a grandmother she barely knew, a way of honoring Gertrude's decade-long vigil by continuing the search with modern tools. "I'm grateful the police haven't given up," Gail tells reporters, who still occasionally contact her. "After 80 years, they're still investigating. That's remarkable." The family has prepared themselves for any outcome. If remains are discovered and identified through DNA, they'll finally have closure and a place to mourn. If a living person matches the genetic profile, someone who took a consumer DNA test and discovered they're connected to the Marlows, they'll welcome that person, regardless of what life they've lived. The goal isn't to reclaim Richard or undo 80 years of someone else's existence. The goal is simply truth, knowledge, the answer to a question that has haunted 3 generations. The broader impact of Richard's case extends beyond one family's grief. His disappearance represents hundreds of historical missing persons cases across Canada. Children who vanished before modern forensics, before digital databases, before DNA analysis. Many will never be solved. Evidence has degraded or disappeared. Witnesses have died. Physical landscapes have changed beyond recognition. But cases like Richard's demonstrate that resolution remains possible even after decades of silence. Technology catches up to old mysteries. New tools reveal answers that seemed permanently lost. On Beta Street, the Marlow house no longer exists. The entire block has been redeveloped, the old homes replaced by newer construction, the physical space transformed beyond recognition. The ponds where searchers waited in 1944 are gone, filled in and built over. The creeks flow through underground culverts now, invisible beneath parking lots and roadways. The landscape holds no memory of that July evening when flashlights cut through darkness and voices called a small boy's name into the silence. Only documents preserve what happened. Police reports, newspaper archives, Gail's carefully maintained collection of family materials. But the story survives. Richard Marlow exists in databases, in genetic profiles, in age-progressed photographs, in podcast episodes and documentary segments. He exists in Detective Chen's active case file and in the memories Gail shares with her children. He exists as a reminder that children who vanish deserve to be remembered, that families deserve answers, that investigations should never truly close while any possibility of resolution remains. Somewhere, the truth waits. Perhaps in an elderly man's fading memories of a childhood that doesn't quite match the story he was told. Perhaps in remains yet undiscovered, waiting in an unmarked location for the technology that can give them a name. Perhaps in a descendant's DNA test, taken for curiosity about ancestry, that will suddenly connect them to a family tree showing Richard David Marlow, born 1935, missing since 1944. The answer exists somewhere. It must. A 9-year-old boy cannot simply cease to exist in 15 minutes without leaving any trace. Something happened on Beta Street that summer evening. Someone knows what. The truth is out there, and the search continues. Gail keeps her grandmother's photograph on her desk. Gertrude Marlow before Richard disappeared, smiling at the camera, a woman who doesn't yet know that heartbreak awaits. Beside it sits Richard's school picture, the last photograph taken before he vanished. Blonde hair, blue eyes, shy smile, the aluminum ring visible on his small finger. He looks impossibly young, impossibly vulnerable, frozen forever at age 9 while the decades accumulated around his absence. 80 years is a long time to wait, but for the boy who vanished in minutes on Beta Street, the search continues and will never stop until the truth finally comes home. For Gail Dykeman and the Marlow family, the search represents more than solving a cold case. It represents honoring Gertrude's vigil, acknowledging Gerald's lifelong guilt, recognizing that Richard mattered then and matters now. The oldest active missing persons case in Toronto police history stands as testament to institutional persistence and family devotion, proof that some questions deserve to be asked forever until answers finally emerge. The truth waits somewhere, in the intersection of memory and science, past and present, loss and hope. And on Beta Street, where a small boy once rode his bicycle in endless circles, his story continues. If you found Richard's story compelling and want to help keep cases like his in the public eye, Please subscribe to our channel. Your support ensures that missing persons are never forgotten, and that families searching for answers know they're not alone. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a case that needs to be heard.